European Educational Information and Communication Technology presents Educational Satellite Television Programs.
Hello, teacher. Hello, students. Welcome to today's lesson on the general properties of covalent compounds. Previously, we discussed coordinate covalent bonds. We learned that once formed, these bonds are identical to any other covalent bond. However, when they are forming, only one atom provides the electron pairs for sharing. This atom is called the donor. The atom that shares these electrons is called the acceptor. We learned that in order to be a donor, an atom must have a lone pair of valence electrons. In order to be an acceptor, an atom must have at least one vacant orbital. In today's lesson, we will be discussing the general properties of covalent compounds. We will also talk about an experiment that involves the melting point and solubility of covalent compounds. This will help us to investigate their physical properties. Students, if you are prepared, then we will get started right away. Covalent compounds are most often liquids or gases when they are at an ordinary temperature. However, some covalent compounds are found as solids. List as many covalent compounds as you can think of. They can be in any state of matter. You may begin now.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up! Let's get back to our lesson.
Welcome back, students. I wonder how many covalent compounds you were able to list. Did any of you name some from each state of matter? I will show you the list I came up with so that you can compare it to yours. Water and ethyl alcohol are examples of covalent compounds that are found as liquids. Hydrogen chloride, methane, and carbon dioxide are covalent compounds that are found as gases. Sugar and dry ice are solid covalent compounds. Let us continue our lesson by discussing more general properties of covalent compounds. Unlike ionic compounds, non-polar covalent compounds do not conduct electric current when they are molten or in aqueous solution. This is because they are made up of molecules rather than ions. But polar covalent compounds can conduct electricity in aqueous solution. In order to explore a couple more physical properties of covalent compounds, let us demonstrate a couple of experiments. First, we will investigate the effect of heat on covalent compounds. A small amount of naphthalene is placed into a dry test tube, and it is heated to a high temperature. Students, it is important to remember that naphthalene is toxic and therefore should neither be inhaled or allowed to come into contact with exposed skin. The test tube of naphthalene is observed as it is heated. It does not take too much heat before the naphthalene begins to vaporize. This experiment is repeated 2 more times with iodine and graphite separately. Iodine is also toxic and should not be inhaled or directly touched. It can be observed that, like the naphthalene, iodine only needs a low temperature in order to vaporize. Graphite, by contrast, will melt at a relatively high temperature. Let us discuss another experiment which investigates the solubility of covalent compounds. 12 test tubes are arranged in 3 sets of 4. The first is set A, the second is set B, and the third is set C. Each test tube in set A receives 1 gram of naphthalene. Each test tube in set B receives 1 gram of graphite. Each test tube in set C receives 1 gram of iodine. 10 milliliters of water are then added to the first test tube in each set. 10 milliliters of ethanol to the second test tube in each set. 10 milliliters of hexane to the third test tube in each set. And finally, 10 milliliters of benzene to the fourth test tube in each set. All of the test tubes are then shaken and observed. In the first set of test tubes, the naphthalene only dissolves in the tube that contains hexane. In the second set, the graphite does not dissolve in any of the test tubes. In the third set, the iodine dissolves in ethanol. Naphthalene dissolves in both hexane and benzene. Students, from the experiments we have discussed, what statements can we make about the melting point and solubility of covalent compounds? Please discuss this with the students around you.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up! Let's get back to our lesson.
Hello again, students. I am sure that you had an interesting discussion with your classmates. From the experiments we discussed, we can conclude that covalent compounds generally have relatively low melting and boiling points. We can also conclude that covalent compounds are not soluble in polar solvents such as water. However, they are soluble in nonpolar solvents such as benzene and carbon tetrachloride. Did you discuss these answers with your classmates? If you did, then you must have been paying good attention to the lesson. Excellent work! In today's lesson, we discussed the general properties of covalent compounds. We learned that these compounds are most often liquids or gases at normal temperatures, but that they can also be solids. We learned that they have low melting and boiling points compared to ionic compounds, and that they do not conduct electric current when molten or in aqueous solution. We also learned that covalent compounds are insoluble in polar solvents. However, they are soluble in non-polar solvents. This brings us to the end of the lesson for today. Until next time, thank you, teacher. Thank you, students.